Get ready for a life-changing show as we encourage all business owners and entrepreneurs to dare to become successful. Today, I'm joined with Don Sando. He is the president of Strategic Results Group, and I'm super excited to have him on the show. Welcome to the Go Legal Yourself podcast. This show is about knowing the legal life cycle of your business. I'm your host, Attorney Kelly Bagler, the Queen of Business Law. Please interact with us on social media with Go Legal Yourself, and do find us on the web at golegalyourself.com. This podcast is about knowing the legal life cycle of your business, and by knowing where you are, it's easier to become successful. Welcome, Don.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Kelly.
You're a hard man to track down. So do you have any funny tidbits or a joke that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh, gosh. Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head.
You know, a favorite little tidbit or something funny that you sort of enjoy. Tell us something about yourself.
Well, I started off as a computer engineer at Hughes Aircraft. And after doing that a few years, realized that wasn't my personality. I didn't want to do that forever. So I switched over to Hewlett-Packard and worked in the marketing department. And we had 125 people in our marketing department. So when you were assigned something or you had a responsibility, you became an expert in whatever that was. And I was very fortunate to be able to move around a lot and move to every year and a half. I switched to a different department working on some other aspect of marketing. So I got, very exposed to the entire, marketing function.
Isn't that a great place to actually learn how to become an expert within an industry? That can happen when you start to work for a large corporation.
Exactly.
Someone might have heard of HP. It's really amazing that you got such strong experience.
Yeah, I was very lucky. And I remember when I'd only been there a couple of weeks, right? And I worked late a couple of nights. Came home and I was all fired up about my job, and my wife was like, "What are you so fired up about? This is just a job, right?" And I said, I'm one of 75,000 employees.
Yeah.
I said, I feel like I can really make a difference in this business. And so I was just on fire to do that.
And then from HP, where did you go?
I got recruited away to a smaller high-tech company. Of course, by HP standards, everything is smaller.
Of course.
So it was called DH Technology, another high-tech company here in San Diego. And I was worldwide director of marketing and sales for them. And what they hired me for is because one of my roles at HP was strategic planning, and I facilitated that process for different HP divisions. And one in particular I remember was the Singapore division. They said, go over to the Singapore division. They have 3,000 employees. They need to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And I'm like, okay.
Yes.
But that was why I got recruited by DH, because they had some patents that were expiring and had been generating, a nice cash flow, and that was going to stop. And it was like, well, what are we going to do to continue our growth rate? So that was why they brought me on board and analyzed the market and determined that their real opportunity was international business development. That they dominated in their little niche, the U.S. market, but they had a very minor presence in Europe and zero presence in Asia. And so for the next 4 years, all I did was international business development, establishing their markets first in Europe, until we eventually actually put our number one competitor from Italy out of business, took over all their business. And then we went over to Asia and penetrated into Japan, Korea, mainland China in particular.
So as you might know, this show is an international show, Go Legal Yourself podcast. So we have thousands of listeners around the world. And the reason why I wanted to interview you is because I know most of these business owners that listen to the show, even though they're situated outside the US, the goal now is to do some sort of business in the US. The US is thriving. The economy is strong. It's always been strong. And even some of our US companies that are listeners here, maybe the next step for them is to take their products overseas. But few know how to do this. Going back to marketing is a big, massive monster. And there are so many different aspects of marketing. But for a business owner, Don, you mentioned earlier you were hired to do strategic planning. That's your expertise. So walk the audience through exactly how you would help them grow their business, either bringing it from international waters to the US or even taking US products internationally.
So HP, we had a phrase. We try to keep things simple. And we talked about the 3 C's of marketing. The customers, the competitors, and then the contribution that you are going to make, or your competitive advantage, right? So what I have discovered is that companies that are above 100 million in revenues, they have people on staff that focus on this. But companies below that typically do not. And they don't have that expertise, and they don't realize that, you don't have to have it full time. It's a project. You can come in there, you can analyze the market, you can do it over a course of a few weeks, and you can figure out where the opportunity is, And so one of the things that I've noticed, especially like I've worked with a couple of different companies from Europe wanting to bring their products over here. And I remember the software company in Norway in particular, and they were doing very well in Norway, and think, well, gosh, the U.S. is, 10, 15 times larger than we are, so we'll just go over there and be as successful over there as we are over here. Well, it's a lot more complicated, and there's a lot of things that, Europeans tend, if they haven't done business over here, they tend to think of our states like their countries, and they think, okay, well, I'm going to go in this state and do business. Well, no, our states, the borders are very penetratable. It's like, there's regions in the U.S. There's not like, the states are not like European countries, and competitors tend to be national, right? So, right, they're not, okay, I'm just, because in Norway, they may have one set of competitors, but if they move over into France, it's a whole different set of competitors. In Italy, not in the U.S. It's, they're national competitors. So the first thing is really defining who are your target customers that you want to market to.
That's huge, Don. That's really what I want to touch upon, because if you don't know who your target market is and you're going to put your product out there in the world, you kind of are flying solo. You've got no direction, you don't know who you're targeting, and you can't be everywhere and cannot possibly be everyone. So you're going to be wasting time, money, and effort, including resources. So first thing is define your target market.
Yes, and not just, not just what's the demographic, but really drill down, and that's what we spend a lot of time in strategic planning, is drilling down to understand who those target customers are and what it is, that they are looking for. So why are they going to buy from you, right? What are their criteria? If they are, if they're going to be choosing between you and your competitor, right? So what are the questions that they're going to ask? You need to know that. What are their criteria? And you also really need to figure out, how do they find what it is that you're selling, right? So everybody thinks, I just got to go on Facebook and do everything on Facebook. Well, that's not where everybody looks.
Exactly.
Yes. And so I've talked to people that have spent, thousands of dollars on Facebook and got nothing out of it. And I talked to an attorney who, here's my joke, right? I talked to an attorney who spent $100,000 on direct mail Right?
Good Lord.
Yes.
And I'm shocked. You talk to other attorneys? Don.
I know. I know. And I asked him, I said, so what did you get out of, how many clients did you get out of this? And he goes, 0. And I'm like, well, that's because who looks for an attorney in their mailbox?
Right.
It's like, so what were you thinking? Well, look, it was a great sales guy came in and said, this is what we do. And it's like, okay, great. Yeah. That's the problem with not having a strategy and just listening to the first salesperson that comes in the door.
Exactly. Yes.
But like using this Norwegian company as an example, they had a software product and they sold it to CFOs of, medium-sized companies. Well, in Norway, you can call the CFO of a medium-sized company and they answer the phone. And you can say, hey, I'd like to make an appointment. Oh, come on down. Right? Well, try to call the CFO of a medium-sized company in the U.S. and you'll never get past the gatekeeper.
Exactly.
You can leave a voicemail message. They'll never call you back. It's, 0. So their whole thought was they took their best salesperson from Norway, moved her over here, said, go do over there what you did here, and she failed.
Right.
She was totally unsuccessful, right? And then the other thing that I've seen over and over again is the language differences. I worked with Koreans and Indians and stuff, and they'll write something, and I'll read it and go, I don't know what you're talking about.
There was a company they created. I believe the product was vacuums, and it was a European-based company. I believe it was called Electrolux. I don't know what the purpose of that is, but they wanted to bring their products to the US. And their tagline in Europe was, nothing sucks like an Electrolux. And they wanted to bring that over to the US. Nothing sucks here in the US means it's the worst thing ever.
I remember this Korean company that it was a very technical product, and I reading their brochure, and they were talking about, they were trying to explain how their products had evolved over time, and then they go, like wine and like fine women, this thing, and I'm going, oh my God, you can't say that. It's like, I was like, oh my God, stop.
I wonder what kind of customers they would have.
I know, it's like,
should have stayed on that.
Yeah, that's right. You're not going to get a lot of female engineers buying this product, let me tell you.
Oh, that's funny. So you get it.
See? Yeah.
You get it.
Yes. So the first thing is, really drilling down on your customer, really understanding, why they buy and how they buy. And then the second C is competition, right? And your competitors over here are going to be most likely very different than your competitors in whatever country you're at. Wow. And the same is true if you are in the U.S. and you want to, start to export. We were exporting to Europe. Well, our competitor in Europe was a company out of Italy. That was the company that dominated. They had very little presence in the U.S. at that time. Right. So really understanding your competition and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and are there weaknesses that you can take advantage of, that you can exploit.
Yes, I personally love competition. There are 1.34 million business law attorneys in the US, just in the US. And that, to me, means that there's enough work out there for everyone. There's a demand. There's an actual demand. So I love competition. And what customers sometimes look for is the next best thing, or they're just looking for someone that's just accessible. So when someone calls me, Don, I answer my phone. My secretary doesn't answer it. I answer it. They've got direct connection to me. And that is pretty valuable for some of my clients. Maybe they've got a quick question. Larger law firms, they have to go through the secretary, the paralegal, maybe the first year associate and the second year associate, and eventually they get to the partner. When you said that here in the US, there are gatekeepers, and you really need to understand the mentality of how business is done here in the US as opposed to Europe or anywhere else around the world.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the third thing is really understanding your contribution or your competitive advantage. So what is it that you are, that your product or your service is better? And is it something that the buyers care about? Right. So you might say, well, hey, so you just commented about how you answer the phone,
yes,
directly. Right. Well, so your customers, that's important, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So, there might be other things that, like I've had prospects who say, well, what do you know about my business, and my industry? I don't know anything about you're a general contractor, right? I've never built a thing. Right. I've hammered some nails, I've got a, tennis elbow to prove it. Yeah. But I said, I know, the process for analyzing your customers. And, I always, there's a favorite exercise I like to do, especially with medium-sized companies, where you get the salespeople and the executives in a room and you say, okay, I want you to write down what you think are your top 3 competitive advantages and put them in priority order. All right. And then if I have 8 people in the room, I get 8 different lists.
Right.
They never agree, and they look at each other like, how could you say that,
Isn't that pretty amazing?
Yeah,
this is a group that works together.
I know, they all work together, and it's like, and salespeople, they think of, the last deal they lost. Well, the reason they lost was this was the number one thing. Well, okay, for that customer, and so then I tell them, how powerful would your marketing be if you all really knew what those top 3 things were, and if you all understood that and agreed, and your sales and your marketing message was oriented that way. And they're like, oh my God,
Absolutely.
And I take them through a process to figure that out. And sometimes that requires, doing surveys. Well, sometimes their salespeople know, but nobody's ever asked them. And sometimes they don't know. And they're like, we need to do a survey. We got to ask our customers why, I say, well, why did this last customer buy from you? And they can't answer it. I don't know. I'm good looking. That's why they bought from me. Okay, well, maybe.
Right.
And then you better hire somebody better looking next time.
Isn't it really amazing when it comes down to knowing exactly who your target market is and knowing exactly what product you put out there that's better than your competitors? That's really a simple formula. However, it's a very difficult process to go through.
Yes. What happens is, we all get so busy doing, right? And then we forget to think. Right?
That little thing.
Exactly. Step back. Think, right? Take a little bit of time, analyze what's going on. I'm starting with this client right now. It's a trucking company. And so I said, well, send me your customer list for the last sales by customer for the last 3 years, right? And so then I put them in priority order. I analyze them and go, okay, X% of your business is coming from, here's the 80% of your business comes from 20% of your clients. Well, in their case, 80% of their business comes from 2 clients. You're like, okay. And so you got all these, and I give them this list, and they it's like something they've never seen before. They're like, oh my God, look at this. And it's like, well, it's a simple exercise, right? It's something that you should do every year. But, if you come from a huge organization like HP, it's this is what we do, right? But if you've never been exposed to that, you don't know that this is what we do.
So if some of the audience members out there, they're listening to you right now, and they might be struggling with either growing their business or even thinking of whether it's the right business to bring to the US or even export elsewhere. So when is the right time, Don, for someone to reach out to you and say help?
Well, if they're successful, I always say be successful where you are. Right? Okay, now it's ready. Now you're ready to expand. Okay, and then we need to start with analyzing where it is that you want to go. And there's several steps you have to go through. And so I kind of like put it in milestones, right? And so I start with, who are your competitors and who are your customers where you're at? Now, let's look at, are those competitors the same? Are those customers the same where you want to go? Right? And if they're different, and then what about pricing? Right? So pricing might be very different. Right? And when we were at HP, we would develop products and then we'd sell them, worldwide. So we had to analyze pricing for every country. And the way we priced it in Japan would be very different than the way we priced it in the US, right? So you had to have a pricing strategy and then implement that strategy and maybe take a lower margin, or maybe over in this country you can get a higher margin.
Isn't that what just happened with the new iPhone? So the new iPhone, I believe it was either in Japan selling for at least $1,000, and here in the US the sales weren't doing so well. Who's going to dish out $1,000 for a phone?
Yeah.
So I think they have to step back and kind of restructure the pricing. That's actually important.
Yeah. I remember one of our products at HP was not doing well in Japan, and we didn't know why. So Don, go over there and figure out. So I went out there. I had our HP salespeople take me around to all their customers and examine what was going on. And this particular product was used for creating architectural drawings. And in the U.S., you can't make changes to a drawing on site, right? So all drawings were done, on blueprint or in pen or something, and then you would redline it, you would go back, you would change it, and so all of our products, we didn't use an erasable device, right? But in Japan, you go on site and say, gee, can you move this 2 feet over in that direction? And they would just erase it, move the line over and draw it with pencil, right?
Right.
And then they would sign it and go, okay, this is good, right?
Right.
And our product was not capable of doing a drawing in pencil. For the competition, which were Japanese competitors, they were capable of producing drawings in pencil. So that was why our product was doing so poorly.
It truly is a difficult decision to leave your homeland, wherever your business is, and go to someone else's. It should be a huge decision. And there needs to be a lot of research put into that decision, because attached to that decision can be a lot of money that a business owner could potentially lose. I have some clients that are internationally based, but yet they sell their products here in the US, and they want a US presence, and so that's where I come in. Analyze the market. I mean, you have to have some sort of, real life experience like you. You have to have that bad experience to understand, where do you start from?
Exactly. Because distribution in the U.S. can be very different from distribution in, different countries, right? And the Japanese system of distribution is very complicated. Yes. And very high cost, right? A lot of customer support on every level, right? But it's not that way in the U.S. But there's depending on your product, there's distributor. I remember working with a paint manufacturer. They wanted to bring their paint and sell their paint in, and it's like, okay, well, we have national chains of paint stores. Right. So yes. You got to get into a national chain, but their headquarters is in Pittsburgh. Right. So you're not going to go into a store, in Southern California and get them to carry your paint. You got to go, to the headquarters in Pittsburgh and convince them that your paint is better than, or, as good as, and less expensive, or whatever it is, than the paint that they're carrying. Right. And so the distribution, and then the marketing costs. All right. So what is it going to cost to do this? So, I've seen smaller companies that they'll just take an employee and place them over here in the U.S. or they'll hire a rep, or a representative in the U.S. and say, okay, here's our product, go sell it.
Well, exactly.
And and then what happens is they're unsuccessful because they don't. Salespeople are not marketing analysts. They're not marketing strategists. They're salespeople. You point them and say, okay, go here, say this, this is why our product is better. And this is so, and here's who cares about that. Right. So the marketing strategist has to figure that all out, so what happens is a lot of them put people over here for a year and a half. It fails. They bring them back and go, well, that was a total fiasco, right? I spent all this money,
yes.
And it's like, no, maybe it could have been successful. It's just the way you did it was not it had a very low probability of success.
It's incredible the new information you've shared with us today, Don. So here's the 3 C's. It was customer, contribution, competitor,
and competitive advantage or contribution.
Contribution, right? That is your fantastic contribution. So are there any exciting projects you're working on right now?
I gave a talk recently at the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce, and
wonderful chamber, by the way.
Yeah. And the topic was employee accountability, accountability to performance. A process that I've developed over my career that kind of, started at HP, and there's a lot of different studies about why organizations are not successful. And I gave a talk, and it went over very well, and there were a lot of people interested in implementing that process in their company. So that, I'm like, okay, I got to get off my rear end and write this book. It's like, I got to put it in the book and do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't you created some products that are available for sale?
Well, I use, no, I have not created any products myself. I use...
Hint, hint.
Yeah. Actually, there's a company out of Texas that created a lot of processes. One of the biggest challenges in implementing a strategic plan is getting people to change their behaviors, because they're used to doing things a certain way, and when you come up with a new strategy, those ways no longer work.
Change is so difficult. I am such a creature of habit. That's why dogs love me. Dogs, they're creatures of habit and do the same thing every morning. I wake up, brush my teeth the same way. I take my vitamins the same way. And it's subconscious. I don't deliberately do this. And really sort of changing someone's behavior, by just telling them that. What's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results. We're trying to help business owners and entrepreneurs from losing thousands of dollars, because every mistake you make in business costs you thousands of dollars. And being a business owner who is really serious about their business and they want to go to the next level, that next level could be expanding their business. But even in the US, for the listeners here in the US, if you want to take your products from one state to the next, highly, highly recommend you reach out to Don, because each state has its own challenges as well. You can't just sell one product and expect it to do well, over in Alaska.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is that, a lot of companies that engage me there's kind of like 2 scenarios. One is they're struggling. And, what used to work doesn't work anymore. You see that a lot, especially in today's, fast-changing marketing environment. And so they're looking for, we need to figure out what to do differently. So I've had a series of clients that fit under that umbrella. And then the others are those that really are doing well but want to expand. And it's like, okay, we need to expand. And how do we, put together a plan that we can follow?
Fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience, Don?
No, it's, to me, it's like two phases. Right? The first phase is analyzing and creating a plan, and then the second phase is implementing and doing it. And that's where the behavior change is necessary, typically.
And that's where you are the strongest, if you will hold people accountable.
Yeah. Build in these systems so that people actually are very clear about expectations for success and teach them to hold themselves accountable.
Right. So, Don, how can our audience get in touch with you?
So my website is strategicresultsgroup.com, and my email address is donsando@strategicresultsgroup.com.
And we're going to have all your information as part of our show notes, so our audience can go directly to your episode show notes and reach out to you that way as well. And it has been such a pleasure having you on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for the experience you bring to the table. It's huge, absolutely huge. So thank you again so much for being here. So audience, please feel free to contact us. Directly download the app from your app stores. And when you do download my app, you will get a free ebook copy of my bestseller called Go Legal Yourself. And remember, the only way you become successful is if you make today the day you go legal yourself. By the way, if you do email me directly at kelly@golegalyourself.com, I will send you a signed copy of my book. You can email me from anywhere around the world, so reach out to me and I'll be happy to send you a signed copy of Go Legal Yourself. I am attorney Kelly Bagler, the Queen of Business Law, and it has been my pleasure being your host today. Until next time, cheers to your success.